In this episode of Financial Model Detective, I want to show you an example of debt sizing and debt sculpting in a project finance model. Today I want to talk to you about one of the most important and challenging topics in project finance modeling, which is debt sizing and debt sculpting. Because I don't like to reinvent the wheel, I'm not going to basically teach you like the other tutorials where I tell you how to do things. In this one, I'm not going to tell you exactly what are the steps to create this mechanism, the mechanics for debt sculpting and debt sizing in your project finance model. However, I refer you to Professor Edward Bodmer's website, and he explained it much better than me in step-by-step and in many tutorials and videos how to do debt sizing and debt sculptings in your models. So you need to go to edbodmers.com, and under project finance you will see the debt sculpting in project finance, and here you have different part 1, part 2, multiple issues, sculpting. So you have all these topics that he covered, and he explains in a step-by-step way how to build this in your project finance model. And that's exactly what I did. I took one of my models and I followed Professor Edward Bodmer's steps, and I created that in my model, and that's what I want to show you today. So just to tell you, this is a typical project finance model. Just to take you through the input sheets. So I'm looking at, this is a power plant. I think it's a wind or a solar model, and so we have a typical OPEX, CAPEX and everything. And when it comes to financing, so these are the financing assumption. So the lenders for this project, they are requiring a maximum gearing of 70%. So they don't allow you to be in debt more than 70% of total project costs. In terms of the financing instrument, we have one senior lender, which is giving us 60% of debt, meaning that 70% of total project cost maximum. And is the terms that this lender is giving us is a 15-year tenor with a 5% interest rate. And we have the possibility, because we are just negotiating, we started negotiating with lenders, the repayment profile is not yet fixed by the loan agreement, so we still have no room to negotiate with the lenders. So in the financial model, we have built two methods for repayment. One is mortgage, or it's sometimes called annuity, which is a fixed interest and principal repayment. And we have a manually sculpted, or à la carte, sometimes it's called. So we have these two, and we're going to look at both of them. We have another tranche, which is shorter. It's 12 years, and it's more expensive. It is priced at 5% interest rate per annum. The same thing, we want to see whether we're going to just pay the debt in mortgage style, or we can just, sculpt it so that it matches our cash flow. Okay, so now as a starting point, I'm just gonna put an annuity payment for my debt. That's the base case that you see now. And in terms of debt sizing also, as you will read, so I really recommend you, before you watch this one, go and read Professor Edward Bodmer if you're not familiar with the different terms of debt sizing. He will explain to you. So what I did here in my model, I created a separate sheet for debt sizing. And I put this input parameter, which I'm going to transfer this in my input sheet, because this is a calculation sheet and I should not have any inputs here. So this is a debt sizing switch. So I'm going to say, what are the debt sizing methods? So the first one is maximum. So you're going to size the debt only based on the maximum gearing or debt to capital ratio that the lenders are dictating to you. The second one is the minimum DSCR. Okay, so the lenders, they tell you that you need to guarantee that the future cash flow in your base case financial model is guaranteeing at 1.3, 1.25, whatever X. Okay, so that's the second methodology, and the most common one is the minimum of the two. So they're going to impose you not only a gearing, a maximum debt to capital ratio, however, they will also dictate a minimum DSCR. So you need to satisfy in your base case both of these criteria. So let's say that this is what I do in most of my project finance model, I don't model this minimum DSCR and the debt sculpting, and I'm going to show you why. And this is just because of copy and paste and different problems that we have with the copy and paste that is going to make the model so slow that, you know, it's just basically not doable. So what I do is that most of my models, I just model the gearing, you know, as the limitation, and I'm going to make sure that in my base case the minimum DSCR is satisfied. So let's say that this was the case, that the only limitation that we impose in the model is the gearing. Okay, so when we are sizing the debt, we take the total project cost, which is in this case 102 million euros, and then 70% of that is 71 million, okay, or 72 million euros. So that's going to be our base for debt sizing. Okay, so once we do that, and we're gonna just have an annuity repayment for our debt. Once you do that and you come and you will see this graph here is showing you the line is just the DSCR curve, the ratio curve throughout the debt life, and the gray one is the debt service, total of principal plus interest, and the green one is your cash flow available for debt service. Okay, so as you can see here, with the 70% gearing that the lenders are imposing, you are basically very easily satisfying this 1.3. And let's say that they are imposing 1.3 as their minimum ratio. You see that in most of the periods in the model, you are above, well above the 1.3. Okay, so that gives you an indication that you can just improve this project, optimize it, especially optimize the shareholder IRR, which is now in this case 14.02%. You can improve it by sculpting your debt if the lenders, of course, allow you. Okay, so let's just save this case as one of the cases that we wanna basically compare with the other cases. So I'm going to call this, you know, just gearing limit and annuity. Okay, so that's the one that we're going to start with. Now let's see how we can optimize this. Okay, so what we're going to do is say, okay, what if we go to the lenders and we tell them that we can actually, this project is very cash rich and we can actually go beyond the gearing of 70%. So let's see, by this minimum DSCR of 1.3, which is imposed by lenders, and this is also an input that you need to give to your financial model. Let's say if we change the debt sizing method to the minimum and we keep the debt repayment as annuity, let's see what's going to happen. Okay, so now this has changed. So as you can see, the copy and paste, all the copy and paste are not satisfied. So you need to come and run this button because this is going to take time. I'm going to put a start and end time, which is included in the macro. Let me just show you the macro as well. It is a very simple copy and paste. So you see the number of copy and paste that I have here. You know, we have all this copy and paste in order to allow debt sizing. The typical one is the total project cost. We have also a problem with taxes and all that. So we have all this copy and paste, which is going to take time. So I put a timer here in the end and at the beginning and the end of the code so that we can track how long it takes for the macro to run. So I'm going to put a pause when I'm running it. So, and then I'm going to show you how long it takes, not to waste your time. Okay, so it's finally done. It took us 1 minute and 21 seconds, so it's very long for this to run. And so as you can see here, with this method of debt sizing based on the minimum DSCR of 1.3, this cannot be satisfied. This is just, you know, it's not going to be doable. Okay, so we need to, if we want to do the minimum DSCR, we need to basically sculpt that. With annuity payment, it's not possible. Okay, so you need to sculpt the debt and use the minimum DSCR of 1.3. The annuity repayment, as you can see, the ratios are not satisfied with the annuity repayment, and you're basically going way below 1.3. So what we're going to do here, so we are not going to save this one because this is just, we cannot compare it. As you can see, the ratios are not satisfied, so this is not working. Okay, so there is no need to save this scenario. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to come and keep my debt sizing as the minimum DSCR method. However, in my debt repayment, I'm going to put the switch to 2, meaning that now the model is going to sculpt the debt as well. At the same time that it's sizing the debt, it's also going to sculpt it. Okay, so let's see how this one is going to look like. And most probably I need to also put you on pause and come back when the macro is done. Okay, so this is almost done. As you can see here, we have almost the 1 point closer to 1.3. We can optimize it a little bit, but it took a lot of time, another, 1 minute. And so I mean, to be honest with you, that's the reason why I don't include these mechanics in my models. And this is because it just, with the copy and paste, it's not compatible. And that is why Professor Bodmer is working on this parallel technique, parallel model with the UDF. And it's going to include all this debt sizing, debt sculpting, and all of it in it. So us as users, we just need to insert it in our model, and it's going to do all the debt sculpting and debt sizing for us without the need to run a button and wait 1 minute. When you're live in a meeting or when you're in a rush to give like 10 scenarios to your team, that's going to be very difficult, to wait 1 minute for each scenario to run. Okay, so that's the problem with this technique that I wanted to show you here. And then, now that you know the problem, we're just going to focus on the results. Okay, so in this method, now we are saying that if the lenders, they say, okay, you're free to raise as much debt as you want. Okay, if that's the case, then you can raise up to almost 90% debt. Okay, and of course, your ratios is gonna explode. If you're just putting 10% equity, and which is much more expensive than your debt, of course your IRR will be very high. So let's just save this one also. It's not realistic, but let's just save it. It's going to be just 90%, let's call it like this, 90% debt and sculpted. Okay, so that's just but we have a little issue with the ratios, but we can sort it out. It's just we are not going to waste more time on it because it's not acceptable by our lenders. Okay, so now what we really need to do is to come to our debt sizing sheet and choose the one that's going to pick up the minimum. So although this project we can raise 94 up to 90 million euros of debts, but the lenders, it's going to be too risky for them, and they're going to say, no, we're going to limit the debts that you can raise up to 72 million. However, you can sculpt the debt so that you can benefit from the debt sculpting. Okay, so now let's look at this. Let's put the debt sizing to the minimum of the 2 so that our limit is going to be this time the maximum debt to capital ratio. However, we're going to keep the debt sculpting in our model. And the minimum ratios that we're going to choose, so we're going to say sculpt the debt in such a way that we're going to have 1.3 throughout the debt life. Okay, minimum we want to secure 1.3. Okay, so I'm going to run the macro and we're going to see what the result is going to be. My expectation is that this project is cash rich. As you can see here now as well, the minimum ratio with a straight line or equal the DSCR, it's going to be much higher than the minimum they require. But let's run it and see what's going to be the minimum DSCR under this method. Okay, we are done. As you can see here, the sculpting is just going to secure us a minimum DSCR of 1.59, okay? And the IRR is 14.58, which is higher than this case when we had annuity repayment, but it's lower than this one, which was not the realistic one. So let's copy this one, and we're gonna call it minimum DSCR 1.3 throughout. Okay, I don't know how to call it, but that's gonna do. Okay, so we said let's sculpt it with using 1.3 throughout, and that's what we're gonna get. Okay. All right, so now what we can think about is, let's say that, okay, you know, as you can see here, the ratios are very high, right? So what if we're gonna sculpt it in such a way that we're gonna have a very high DSCR in the beginning, so that we can basically extract dividends in the early years, and then as we progress with the project, we're going to pay more debt, so that the DSCR gradually is going to go to the minimum that the lenders require, which is 1.3. Okay, so that's what we call, Professor Edward calls it curve sculpting. Okay, so here I'm going to dictate in the basically macro and in the whole mechanics that I build in the model. I'm going to say start with the DSCR of 3, and then gradually go and make sure that the minimum of 1.3 is reached after the end of the debt life of the shorter tenor. Okay, so let's do that. I'm gonna run the macro again. Most probably I will pause. Okay, so you see again, it's just taking very long to run this. So it did it for us. So it's starting with very high ratio in the beginning, then eventually it's gonna go down. But in this one we have a problem here. It's 1.29. Maybe we're gonna remedy this. So 1.29. So we are very aggressive most probably in this one. So we are gonna so that's a little bit of trial and error. And you might tell me that why don't you use a goal sig and say, change this starting point so that you make sure that you have a minimum DSCR of 1.3. Unfortunately, another problem with copy and paste is that when you have all these lines of copy and paste, you cannot use basically the goal seek function under Excel. So you need to either include another macro, goal seek macro, and then run it while the other copy and paste are running, and that's going to even slow down your model much more. So we just want to avoid this. So I'm just going to manually do some trial and error on the starting point so that I can guarantee the 1.3 by the end of all the debt lives. Okay, and again, all this, even the goal seek, is included in the parallel model from Edward Bodmer, so that we don't need to go through all this hassle of manually changing things. So now I'm going to go and let's say, what about 2? What if I start with 2? What's going to happen to the curve? And before I get into that, let's save that scenario. No, we are not going to save it because it's not working. Sorry about that. Okay, so now let's do 2 and sculpt the debt and see what's going to happen. Okay, with 2, as you can see here, now it's starting with the target ratio of 2 and it's sculpting the debt. But when you get into the end, you're at 1.36. Okay, so maybe we can even do better. So we're going to do another trial as well. But before we do that, let's save this one. We're going to call it starting DSCR of 2. Okay, so that's another. So as you can see here, we could reach from 14% with the annuity repayment. We can now have a shareholder IRR of 15.4%, which is a great improvement in the IRR, right? But we want to do even more. We are a bit we want to do a bit more, so let's just push it a little bit more so that we can reach 1.36. So we are now at 15.41%. Let's target 2.1 in the beginning and sculpt it and see how let's put 2.2. Okay, and see if we can get exactly 1.3. Okay guys, so I was a little bit ambitious. So with 2.2 now, the minimum DSCR at the end is 1.28. So it's not doable. So I'm going to just go a little bit lower and I'm going to do 2.15. Okay, and let's see whether 2.15 I can get exactly 1.3. Okay guys, so we are good. So with 2.15, as you can see here, we can get 1.3 at the end, exactly 1.3 at the end. And look at our IRR is 15.55, which is even better than this one. Okay, so let's say starting DSCR of 2.15x. Okay, so imagine, so now you go to your lenders and you tell them, you know, if they accept this sculpting, this repayment profile that you come up with here, which is giving this DSCR curve, if they are okay with it, then you can imagine that you can have a much more improved equity IRR with this method, and you can easily also repay the debt and satisfy both the lenders and also the shareholders. So as you can see here we had a luxury of really optimizing our repayment profile because this project is basically cash rich. Okay, if you have basically a project, most probably somewhere in Europe, which the target IRRs for like renewable projects is like around 5%, sometimes less. So most probably you won't have this luxury, and you can only have a minimum DSIs your debt based on the minimum DSCR that the lenders they require. So if you want, we can also have a look at another example with the cash poor basically project and see how it's going to look like. But I think that's going to be enough for this video. I hope you liked it. If you liked it, please comment and let me know what you think, or if you have any questions, let me know. And I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you and bye. If you want to learn how to build better financial models, check out my online course on financial model spreadsheet design at courses.phoenixmode.com.